Hello, I'm Dr. Daniel Farkas DC, CFMP, and I want to talk to you today about how to think about inflammatory bowel disease and some things that can really drive it, some things that you can actually do something about too as well. So inflammatory bowel disease is an actual disease process that includes things like ulcerative colitis, Crohn's disease, ordinary colitis, and it causes inflammation throughout the bowel, throughout the small intestine, throughout the large intestine. It can even get all the way up and through into the mouth too as well. So ordinarily they analyze it, using a scope, an upper or lower GI scope. They prescribe any of the many medications that are designed to break up the bad pattern that the inflammation can get stuck in, and they use things like suppositories like mesalamine. They use ordinary steroids like prednisone too, and they encourage people to have good lifestyle habits in order to try to keep the inflammation at bay. But what I want to talk about today are some things you might not be aware of that can give you some insight into what else can be done long term. So when I think about IBD, I think about what is triggering it. I'm always interested in that. I'm always interested in the cause of what's triggering it. And there are a few considerations. Number one, the inside protective lining of the small intestine. I say that's where the magic happens. That's where absorption takes place directly into the bloodstream. Now that can break down on the inside, and when it breaks down, unfortunately, that intelligent defensive barrier, the inside protective lining of the small intestine, that's supposed to keep bad things out, unfortunately, it can start to allow bad things in. And that could be as simple as like pesticides, plastics, beauty and hygiene products, food colorings, dyes, water pollution, bad oils in food, all this bad stuff. And just imagine this. It becomes a portal of entry into the bloodstream of obnoxious things that the brain and its sidekick, the immune system, do not like. So just imagine someone comes to your house all the time, and every time they walk in, they leave the front door wide open. Whether it's freezing out or hot out or raining, morning, noon, and night, they just leave the front door wide open. It's just something they won't stop doing. It would start to bother you. Imagine that. Now imagine that the intestine becomes this portal of entry of obnoxious things getting into the bloodstream. The brain and immune system are going to develop a bad attitude towards it, if you will. And then they can be very prone to launching inflammation in that area. And again, that's what this, IBD is, inflammatory bowel disease. It's unnecessary, if you ask me, inflammation in the bowel. So we're looking for other reasons why. That could be one of them. Some people call that leaky gut. There's about 10 different names for it. But just imagine the protective barrier that's supposed to protect the bloodstream from bad things getting in there. Imagine that being broken down. How would the immune system and brain think about that? They wouldn't like it at all. And they would do what they can against it, which is to drop bombs and go in there, send unnecessary inflammation, lesions, and make people suffer. The other thing to consider is, and I'm sure you're aware, that there are trillions and trillions of bacteria throughout the entire gastroenterological system, from your mouth all the way out the other end. And so 90% of these bacteria actually live in the large intestine where the stool is made, where poop is made. But know this, these bacteria, they communicate with the brain and the immune system. They send information up a nerve you might have heard of called the vagus nerve, VAGUS. This is the wire communication superhighway between the brain and the gut. Now we say we don't run on Wi-Fi, not yet, but we run on hard wires. So just like an old-fashioned hard phone line, the brain and the gut are talking back and forth all the time. And it's so interesting to point out that the trillions of bacteria that are not human, those send electrical impulses up the vagus nerve to the brain and immune system to relay information to them about what's going on in the gut and how they should behave, because that gut is such a crucial area. Now, unfortunately, there are bacteria, many types, that are pro-inflammatory. They drive and increase inflammation, and they drive autoimmune behavior of the immune system. They drive the body to attack itself, to put lesions on ordinary tissues, just like the inside of the lining of the intestines, for no good reason. So just imagine if you had healthy, balanced, beneficial bacteria all throughout your gut. That'd be wonderful. The brain and immune system would be listening across the vagus nerve, listening for how they should behave. and hopefully they would get just great good news and they'd stay calm. But now imagine if you have pro-inflammatory, autoimmune driving bacteria sending lots of information up to the brain and immune system, telling them to go haywire, telling them to go crazy, telling them to drop bombs, telling them to go in hyperinflammation mode. That's going to be a problem. Here's the good news. These things can be measured. You can use testing that goes beyond, ordinary medical care, ordinary gastroenterological care to honestly assess, is the inner protective lining, is that broke down? Just like I was talking about earlier, some people call that leaky gut. Do you have that? And don't worry if you do, it can be repaired, just like a cut on your hand can be healed. But also, what does the bacteria population actually look like in your gut? Do you have all healthy, beneficial, happy bacteria, or do you have some pro-inflammatory troublemakers in there? These things need to be checked. If you don't check these, then you're kind of flying blind. And the good news is if these problems do pop up, there are natural solutions for them. Using something as simple as something called glutamine, G-L-U, glutamine. Glutamine comes in a powder. There's food sources of glutamine too that come from food, like organic celery juice, that can be deployed for small infants all the way up to people that are 100 years old and beyond, and everyone in between. This glutamine can be deployed to heal up that leaky gut, bring those cells back together, and stop that influx of obnoxiousness that can trigger the brain and immune system. As far as the bacteria, yes, it's possible to use natural things to murder off and kill off the bad, obnoxious, bad bacteria that are preaching and screaming inflammation and autoimmune behavior to the brain. You can get rid of these things, same as they got there. And then finally, you can come back and restore and replant healthy good guy bacteria. Why? To get them signaling proper good news up to the brain and immune system. So I think about IBD. I think about the standard approaches, which are helpful, crucial, like the monitoring and management, the drugs, the steroids, the anti-inflammatories they use are crucial and necessary, and they save lives. But for those that want to take a deeper dive and think a little deeper, like why is this going on? Consider taking an honest look into what's going on. Do you have leaky gut, and what does the bacteria balance look like, good and bad, in your gut? This is all so important, and I do believe it can change and save lives. And once this information is uncovered, then you can start to properly apply some specialty natural support using some things known in our industry as medical foods. It's kind of a strange name, medical food. Medical food kind of doesn't make sense. That was a nickname given to some all natural but advanced support. It was given to them by Big Pharma. Big Pharma came up with this weird nickname, medical food. They didn't know what to call it. What I'm talking about are special powder blends specifically formulated for people with IBD that contain this glutamine, GLU glutamine, to help to heal up the leaky gut, powerful anti-inflammatories, and more. The idea is to give the body what it needs and wants, to calm things down so you can turn the corner and stop signaling bad news to the brain. In addition, stair-stepped probiotics, stair-stepped, where you may likely, in many cases, we use an initial competitive probiotic to compete with the bad overgrowth and send it packing, get them bad guys out of there. Then we come back and replant the healthy good guy bacteria, nurture them and grow them like a beautiful garden, and get them signaling good news to the brain and immune system. All this is possible. I always say don't guess, do a test. That's why I love doing advanced stool tests on my clients. This type of work and service people have access to all over the country and frankly all over the world too as well. So if you had never thought about a different approach of how to consider addressing inflammatory bowel, if drugs aren't working, if drugs scare you, if they're just not cost effective, just know that there are other lines of thinking too that work in conjunction with that crucial work that gastroenterologists do and the immunologists and ordinary practitioners. There is so much more that can be done and is very promising. And if you have any questions about it, I'm easy to track down. There's got to be a link attached to this video. You're welcome to ask me a question anytime, no matter where you are. I love pointing people in the right direction, and it makes a huge difference. And I think it can add not just years to life, but also add life to years. So I'm Dr. Daniel Farkas. Thanks for listening. Be well.